Hi students, welcome to the lesson 1 of C++ programming language by study9.com. The topics that we are going to cover here are what is C++, how it has came into being, then what are the drawbacks of procedure-oriented programming, how it is recovered in object-oriented programming. Then we shall discuss about a C++ program with the concept of class, which is one of the main thing in object-oriented programming. So let's start by discussing about C++ language. C++ is a general purpose, imperative, object-oriented and generic programming language. By imperative, I mean that it describes computation in terms of statements that change a program state. That means like C program, it is divided into a number of blocks or functions, each of which is devoted to do a specific task. After completing that task, it is returning the result to the calling function, and according to that result, the programming state changes. That is called imperative programming. And all of these facts holds true for C++ language as well. The next term is object-oriented. The object-oriented programming concepts we shall discuss later. I mean in this video only, but after 2 to 3 slides. So let's concentrate on the next term, that is generic programming. Well, generic programming means that you are not writing the source code that is compiled as it is, but you writing the templates of the source codes that the compiler in the process of compilation transforms into source codes. The example of C++ way of generic programming is template, which leverages this constraint by letting you define classes where one or more parameters are unspecified at the time you define the class. When you instance the template later, then you tell the compiler that which type it should take to create the class out of the template. In case you are not getting my word, don't worry, as standard template library is the last chapter of our C++ course, so it's natural and we shall discuss vividly in subsequent chapter. The next is, since it is the superset of C, so every valid statements in C are also valid in C++. Even the system level activities also, like memory manipulation. Alright, so now we are going to discuss about a brief history of C++. It was developed by a scientist named Strohstrup, who was a strong admirer of Simula and a supporter of C, wanted to combine the best of both the languages and create a more powerful language that could support object-oriented programming features but still retain the power of C. The result was C++. So I think by now you can understand that why the name is C++. The idea behind this is C++ is the incremented version of C. That's why the name is C++. So this is the history of C++ language. Fine. So next we are continuing to the discussion of procedure-oriented programming language. Well, procedure-oriented programming is the conventional way of programming using high-level language like C program. Procedure Object-oriented programming is one where programs are organized into blocks of code called functions or procedures. Each handles one particular task and they are called in the program whenever and wherever required. Now the drawback of this approach is the main focus is on functions, but the data, that is the most critical element of any program on which the functions are actually working on, they are being neglected. There is a concept called global data in procedural approach, where many important data items are kept outside of all the functions deliberately so that it can be accessed by all the functions. Now in a large program, it is very difficult to identify that what data is used by which function. So any accidental or deliberate modification of the data by the function may cause an undesirable effect. So these are the problems existed in procedural approach. The solution is object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming removed all the flaws encountered in procedural approach by treating the data as the most critical element and developed and does not allow them to flow freely around the system. It hides the data along with the functions those operate on those data into a concept called class. Now the data is completely protected because it is kept safely inside the class. Now the question is, if the data is completely hidden from the outside world, then what is the utility of that data? The answer is, maybe the data is hidden, but the functions that can access the data, they are visible from the outside world. And there is another word called object, which is the instance of a class. They can access the data via function of the same class. So basically, class is the concept, like the human being. Human being is the class and object is the real life entities, like us. We are the human beings. So we are the real life entities, that is objects of the human being class. So the concept of binding data and function together inside the class is called encapsulation. You know a capsule? What is the nature of a capsule? The capsule actually keeps the bitter drug or medicine inside by giving a sweet cover outside. So that sweet cover is the interface that we are taking, that we are swallowing. But the internal medicine is not being exposed in front of us. So this brings another concept called data abstraction. So data encapsulation is a mechanism of binding the data and the functions that use them inside the class. And data abstraction is a mechanism of exposing only the interface and hiding the implementation details from the user. I think you got the concept. So next we are going to inheritance. What is inheritance? Inheritance is the process of acquiring one class's property into another through the objects. Inheritance allows us to define a class in terms of another class, which provides an opportunity to reuse the code. The existing class is called base class or parent class, and the derived class, that means the new class, is called the child class. So that is like us, that we are the children of our parents. So we have acquired the features from our parents. That means we are inheriting the features. The next topic is polymorphism. Polymorphism is another important concept in object-oriented programming. Polymorphism means the ability to take more than one form. An operation may exhibit different behaviors in different instances. For example, consider the operation of addition. For two numbers, it will generate a sum, but for two strings, it will generate a third string by concatenation. So students, I am only trying to give here a preliminary idea about object-oriented programming. The implementation details we shall discuss throughout this course. Now we shall switch into the discussion of our first C++ program. I am assuming that everybody here have a basic idea about computer programming. So to run the program, we shall use Bloodshed Dev C++, a GCC based IDE. In this lesson, I am going to show you how to run a C++ program on Windows system. In the next class, I will run the program in Linux or Unix system. So let's open the IDE first. So I am going to the file menu and creating a new source file. Now I am going back to our presentation and I am copying the code. And paste it. So this is a program on class student. It will ask for the name and the marks from the user, and whatever will be entered by the user, that will be displayed in the place of name and marks. So let's compile and execute the program first, then I will explain the program. So supply the name and marks. Whatever is supplied, that is displayed here. Fine. Now I am explaining the program to you. First is #include IOStream. IOStream is the header file with #include directive. The directive causes the preprocessor to add the contents of IOStream file to the program. IOStream stands for Standard Input Output Header File, in which all the input-output functions like cin, cout are defined. The next line is using namespace std. This is for the scope of the identifiers in the program. It has been added by ANSI committee. This will bring all the identifiers defined in std to the current scope. The scope is namespace. And for doing this, you must include the using directive before the namespace. So I hope you have understood using namespace std. The next line is class student. You know that class is one of the major features of C++ language, which binds data and functions together in a shell. It is something similar with the structure in C. It is a new data type, that is student. Here, this is the name of the class. Now student includes two data. One is can name 30, a string, and the other is float marks. By default they are private, that is invisible from the outside world. Now there are two functions. One is void getData void and the other is void putData void. By declaration the functions are public. These functions are called member functions because they are the members of the class. So they have the access rights that they can operate on the hidden data, that is name and marks. You can see that one of the function, that is putData, is defined inside the class. After that, the braces for the class is closed by giving a semicolon. The other function, that is getData, is defined outside of the class by giving a scope resolution operator. It is void student, then scope resolution operator, then getData function. Scope resolution operator identifies the class to which a member function belongs. Like our member function getData belongs to the class student, like this. Next, cout and cin respectively, the output function and the input function. The double less than sign after the cout, that is this, is called the insertion or put to operator that inserts or sends the contents of the variable on its right to the object on its left. See the function putData here. The name that I am highlighting, now this is the string, that is can name 30. So whatever it contains, it is sending that to the left side of the insertion operator. See the output, I am entering the name and marks. So whatever is entered in the place of name, that is written after is equal to, that is in the left hand side of the insertion operator. Also it is applicable for the marks. Now come inside getData again. Here cout only displays the string inside the double quote, that is enter a name. Endl means the new line. Cin is the input operator that takes the input statement and causes the program to wait for the user to type a name. Okay? And whatever will be entered by the user, that will be placed inside the variable, that is name. Double greater than sign is called the extraction or get from operator. Now come inside main. We have created the object S of student type, and you know that now student is a new data type which is the class name, like any other built-in type. So S is the variable of type student. Now from this object we shall access the member functions, that is get data and put data. As it is already pointed out that the private members of a class like char name 30 and float marks cannot be accessed directly. So they can be accessed only through the member functions of that class. So the format for calling a member function is object name dot function name, like this, s dot get data. So the get data function will be invoked and it will ask for the name and the marks. Next we will call the put data function by s dot put data, and when the put data function will be invoked, it will go in the body of the put data, that is here, and it will display the name and the marks that is entered. Fine. Now I am going back to the presentation. So I hope you have understood the program and so enjoyed the session and got a basic understanding of C++ programming. So if you have any queries or doubts regarding this, please mail me at rpm@study9.com and I shall be very much glad to help you. So all the best and happy coding.